just call me your Lloyd and savior.
I'm sure that's not shirk at all.
Not at all. No. If you want to be like Allah, you're Allah now. How's that?
Yeah, and another thought. I mentioned that before. It really is the religion of peace, and it's really the fault of the infidels that we have to have war. Is because they criticize Islam. They even make YouTube shows where they mock Islam.
They
So
exist.
it's really their fault. It's because of them that we have to have war. If everyone would believe in Islam, then it really would be a religion of peace.
I don't know, man. I don't know Muhammad is.
Yeah, well, at least that's the concept.
Yeah. Yep. So General Zia embraces Malik's expansive understanding of jihad as a duty that extends to individual soldiers as well as individual citizens. So jihad extends to individual citizens, and they draw an explicit distinction between the House of Islam, the Dar al-Islam, and the Dar al-Harb, the House of War. In other words, where you live, because you're not a Muslim. Any thoughts, Usama, before I go further?
Well, it's amazing when we talk about the House of Peace and the House of War, Dar al-Harb or Dar al-Salam. Most people in the West, liberals, will look at you like you lost your mind. That does not exist. You just made this up. When in reality, that is what has been practiced from the day one of Muhammad days until today. And that's what it's taught as you read it in their own writings. So I don't know why they look at us like we're the Islamophobe guys. When in reality, that is what Islam is. If you don't belong to the House of Peace, you belong to the House of War.
And they redefine defensive jihad to include the removal of any obstacles and any resistance to the spread of the message of Islam around the world. So if you are countering Islam, they must make jihad on you. Defensive jihad. Just like, for instance, in the 7th century, the Muslims who were in Arabia, in Mecca, as the story goes, decided, you know what, there's Christians in France, we need to go make jihad on them. And you know what, let's go make jihad all the way across Africa. Let's go into India. Let's go into all of the Levant. Let's go into all of, Turkey. Let's go into Spain to make defensive jihad. So the Meccan Muslims decided to go all the way across Africa and into Spain to go defend themselves in Madrid.
But Lloyd, is this defensive or offensive jihad? Help me out here.
I mean, they had to cross 20 countries to defend themselves. Sorry? Say again?
Well, when I said I saw defense when somebody come to you, but now you're going to them to start a jihad, to start the war. So how can this be defensive?
Are you Islamophobic? They had to go from Saudi Arabia all the way through Egypt, Morocco, Sudan, Tunis, Ethiopia, all the way across Gibraltar into Spain, all the way north into Spain, all the way up to Madrid to defend themselves. And they had to defend themselves in every one of those countries. I mean, will somebody think of the Muslims?
I want to say something, because even though I'm not an expert on Islam as opposed to you guys, and I wouldn't even consider myself a critic of Islam, but this all still sounds very familiar. I talked a lot about the Christian Gnostic sect I grew up in, and we had the same kind of concept, right? Mm-hmm. Every evening we would sit together, and it was almost like an interrogation, but it was dressed up nicely. It was like, oh, we're gonna have dinner now, but before we're gonna have dinner, everyone share about their day, share about their thoughts. Do you have any negative thoughts? Do you have maybe any criticism against our belief? Please share freely. And of course, it's a trap. As soon as you admit to any even any doubt, they're like a pack of wolves, ganging up on you. And they would. Oh, of course. Okay. Well, since this is public, I have to be careful of how I word this. Allegedly. Some people allegedly claim that they would even use violence and use violence until, well, these people don't have any criticism anymore, basically.
Okay. Yep. Oh, it sounds familiar. So yeah, guys, we are dealing with a serious problem. Islam is a serious problem. And of course, we're here to discuss it. But one thing I do want to note is that I have been seeing more and more on social media, which I use as a kind of barometer or weather vane. I'm seeing more people discussing Islam in a pagan light. Even the whole idea of Islam as a moon religion, it started with Robert Morey back in the late 80s, if I recall. And he didn't have the luxury of the internet back then. I did not know about him until after I did my MOONotheism series. And then Sam Shamoon told me Robert Morey had developed that theory like 30 years ago. And then I went and read Robert Morey's book. And basically I had repeated everything that he said, word for word, basically discovering it for myself. And then I did another series based on his book. So, so there's lots more people now starting to see that Islam is not what it claims to be. And I guess we can jump into MOONotheism, Islam and the moon god of Babylon. And I want you to notice here, look at this crescent moon with the little star. Let's look at the crescent and the star, the crescent and the star. This goes to various cultures from Babylon all the way to Africa. And so this Islamic symbolism goes back. This is South Arabian. This is not Arabic. This is South Arabian. And these are the Yemenis, and they influenced Africa. They were influenced by the Babylonians. So this symbol goes back thousands of years. Islam is literally the continuation of an ancient star-worshipping, moon-worshipping, astrological religion. Usama, any thoughts before I go?
Sure. The problem with Muslims who do not know that Islam, there's nothing new in Islam. Muhammad did not make up anything new. So their beliefs, their ideologies, their holy books, the materials they believe in, all came from somewhere else. So even the moon, it will come from previous beliefs or previous worship. Muhammad did not bring anything new, if there is Muhammad, of course.
Yep, that is also true. So guys, let's jump in. And please remember to like, share, subscribe, make jihad on the like button, attack it severely. Please do. And for those of you who are willing to support the channel, we do appreciate it. And for those who do, thank you. We're really grateful. Okay, so we can talk about, we ended on maps last time, but now it's the Sabah, the Sabayoi, the Sabai, and the Bible. So the Sabai, right? These were people in the ancient kingdom known from local inscription as Sba, right? Also, we know it as Sheba, the queen of Sheba. And this was in southwestern Yemen. Saba is tested in Assyrian sources, so in other words, northern Levant sources. Sadly, though, northern Levant sources don't know about the Palestinians, of all things. Neither does the Quran. Crazy, but true. And these sources also don't know about Mecca. They've never heard of the Muslims. They've never heard of the Quran, interestingly enough. And in the annals of Tilgath-Pileser, to whom the Saba paid homage with gifts in 730 BC, right? So that's interesting. So they were written about in 730 BC. That's almost 3,000 years ago. And in the annals of the King Sargon II, where in 715, the Sabaean Tamra is mentioned as bringing tribute. There's an inscription of Sennacherib, according to which in 685, the Karabili sent gifts. And Thunderous, I'm going to send you the link if you want to join us. Link sent to your WhatsApp. So now this is going to be of importance, right? Sennacherib, right? Notice it's Assyrian Sin, or the moon god Shin. So we come back to the moon god Shin. Acheribba, the moon god Shin, has replaced the brothers. So we come back to that name Shin. Remember, the Allah of the South Arabians was known as the moon god Shin, who was also the moon god of Babylon. He was known as Allah. He was known as Shin, but also known as, well, Sin, but also known as Makkah. Had an interesting bunch of names. So does Allah and Makkah sound familiar, Usama?
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's where we get the foundation which Islam tried to put on Abraham and Ishmael to bring Muhammad to this world. Islam was confusion about the beginning of the Kaaba and the confusion about the beginning of the Abrahamic religion. concerning Islam.
Yep. So he had a conflict in Babylon, and then he leaves Babylon, if I recall. So let's continue. So his kingdom falls after civil war between several Yemeni dynasties claiming kingship, and they split into separate territories. And the Himyarite kingdom, think of Yemen again, arose as victors. Their traders they mention in Jeremiah and in Ezekiel, and Job 1:15 describes them as a rival nation of Israel, enemies of Israel due to their religious differences. And in Isaiah 45, they're described of people of great physique. In Job 1:12-15, we see the Sabaeans are used by Satan to attack and enslave Job's family. And what was their main crescent? Oh my gosh, crescent and star maybe? Maybe they were, And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And there was a day his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, The oxen were plowing, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them away. They have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. So the Sabaeans, as we've discussed previously, are believed to be Muslims. This was according to Muhammad Shukri al-Alusi, who compared the Islamic religion to that of the Sabaeans. And in other words, we discovered when we previously discussed this, that something like 90% of the practices of these moon-worshipping Sabaeans are identical to what Muslims practice today. So in his writings, he found that their practices are mostly similar. Their laws are mostly similar. They do everything that modern Muslims do now. Sami, you're nodding your head?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about even the simple study to the 5 daily prayers and the wudu and the fitra, which is the cutting of the fingers, the cleaning of the body, the taking off the hair of the body, and so much of the things which Muhammad brought to Islam as a culture or a way of life, it's actually come out of the Sabaeans.
Yep. So
I want to add something. Last time we talked about the Alkacides, and actually the Alkacides were also known as the I'm butchering this. I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, as the Mu'tazila, which means
Mutazilites, the Mutazilites.
Right. I don't know how to pronounce it, but in any case, it means those who wash themselves. Because they were famous for having, actually, the exact same kinds of washing and cleansing rituals that we have in Islam today.
Yeah, we'll get to some of that, the daily ablution. Now, these Sabaeans were practitioners of many elements of this religion of Abraham that we discussed before. The religion they claim that Abraham practiced before he supposedly, according to the corrupt Jews and Christians, became a Jew. Okay, Sennacherib. Right? Shin is the god Shin, the brothers, and he replaced, right? And the deity Shin or Nana in Sumerian is the Mesopotamian god of the moon and wisdom, brings the hikmah, right? First mentioned in writing in 3500 BC. This is over 5,000 years old. Shin is among the most ancient and prominent deities in human history. All of this is going to be very relevant, and also mention. This is all in the Bible. A lot of this is mentioned in 701 BC. You have 2 Kings, Chronicles, Isaiah, and so on. And so you have Akkadian, the language. All of this is there's a historical record of these people. So Sabaeans carried out trade by land and by sea. They had led to massive growth from the 18th century BC onwards. They established colonies along the Red Sea and in Ethiopia. And remember, this discussion started in Ethiopia. They had a very lucrative spice trade, especially frankincense and myrrh. They lived in the land of Sheba as regional monarchies. The first king was the Qarib al-Bayin, ruling during 700 to 800 BC, right? So the word Qarib is going to be important. Qarib el, the Qarib of El, right? So El meaning, of course, this would be the main deity, right? Qaribilu was the Muqarrib of Saba. He reigned from 700 to 680 BC. The name in Akkadian means the Qarib el-Bayin, in Sabaean combined of Qarib el, which means one who carries out the instructions of El. One who carries out the instructions of El, and Bin, one who removes punishment. So this is a lawmaker as well as a king. So now you've got this theocracy, right? One who can give punishment or take away punishment, and one who follows a Sharia.
So this is, if I can say, the mix between religion and politics, which would be
Yes.
huge in Islam. Islam
Yes.
over 80% is politics, and a little bit less than 20% is religion. It makes sense now. See where he came from. Exactly.
Yeah, and Sabah is mentioned in the Quran. Quran 27 and 34 is the people of Tubba, Qawm Tubba, in Quran 44 and 50 as well. So we're just laying some groundwork again, and now let's talk about the word miqrab, right? And Makoraba. Remember, Makoraba is what Muslims claim that Ptolemy wrote about in the 2nd century as the location of Mecca. As we've discovered, that claim comes from 1648 by Bahart. And we know that it never referred to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. It referred to Yemen, to Al-Mahabisha, the place of the Ethiopians. Mihrab, the prayer niche in the mosque, indicating the direction of prayer, and also refers to the supporting columns. We discussed that in the previous show, and also gives the impression of a door or a doorway from the profane space into the sacred space. You move into the haram, the forbidden space. Now, the Kaaba, outside of the standard narrative in Islam, nothing is known as history. The only reason for presuming that the Kaaba was in existence in the 2nd century is the mention of Mecca as Makaraba by Ptolemy. But we know that Ptolemy was not speaking of Mecca. He was speaking of a location in in Yemen, right? And we spoke of Bohart, who created this confusion in the 1640s in his sacred geography. If we go to the Concise Encyclopedia of Islam, little is known of the history of the Kaaba outside Islamic tradition, but there is reason to believe the shrine was an active pilgrimage site as early as the 2nd century. Now, we know that this culture existed 3,000, 4,000 years ago. There is literally no record or evidence of Mecca, but this is a culture that existed and was prominent 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. And the geographer Ptolemy calls the city Makoraba, and the significance of the word here is the miqrab, or a temple. So there was an existing known temple. Mecca, known to the ancient geographers as Makoraba and to the Arabs as Makkah. The name Makoraba means temple in numerous Semitic languages, and they think this referred to the Kaaba. A scholar called Glazer believes this name may have signified the same as the South Arabian or Ethiopian Miqrab. And we started off this discussion in Ethiopia at ancient temples to the moon god. And in modern Islamic usage, Miqrab means prayer niche. So they've simply borrowed the temple name for star worshipping cults and said, we're borrowing that word and using it now for our religion. Any thoughts before I go on?
I'd say it's starting to look more and more like it was these guys who had their traditions and so on, and then they pick up this book that floats around, we call now the Quran, and they almost update their religion to make it very Abrahamic, like to a degree, but they maintain everything that they had before. And the proximity of Makkah and Yemen also, makes sense that it would not be created close to Jerusalem or anything of the sort. So it's starting to look like these guys had a lot to do with the origins of Islam.
Something like that.
Could also the word makraba, like muqarraba, which is to help to draw near to the deities they are worshipping?
Makaraba is actually just an English version or variant of Muqarriba, and we'll get more into that word, the Muqarribs, because they were the Yemeni warrior priest kings. You see, the jihadi priest managers, So basically, they've got your theocracy, your theocratic idea is right there. And you have the regents of the Muqarribah. So we'll go on about that. This word is important. So these are the propylon at the fake entrance. This is a common feature of Muqarrabs, and we've already shown in the beginning what the significance of these pillars are. So aside from Muslim traditions, practically nothing is known of the history of the Kaaba. The only reason for presuming that the Kaaba was in existence in the 2nd century is the mention of Mecca under the name of Makaraba by Ptolemy. We know now this is false. because Ptolemy was referring to a location in Yemen, which was called Al-Mahabisha, which is the place of the Ethiopians, right? And this name may have signified the same as the South Arabian or Ethiopian Muqrab. And then you have the accounts of the campaign of Abraha, which may have been elaborated with legendary features that also discuss the existence and worship of the Kaaba in the 6th century, but they tell us nothing of its appearance or equipment. And where was Abraha? Well, he was in Yemen. Right, and of course you have the Karib al-Himyari who came to Mecca, right? So note that. So Abraha, also spelled Abreha in the 6th century, he was an Ethiopian Christian viceroy of Sheba of Yemen in southern Arabia. He was a zealous Christian. He built a great church at Sana'a al-Qulais from the Greek ecclesia to compete with the Kaaba at Mecca. He repaired the principal dam at the Sabaean capital of Marib, which is actually mentioned in the Quran. And he's famous for the military expedition that he led north against the city of Mecca in the same year as Muhammad's birth, about 570. It was supported by elephants, and it failed, and Muslims believe that Mecca escaped capture through a miracle. His rule ended in 575 when the Persian Sasanians invaded and brought the Sabaean kingdom to an end. Now, outside of later Islamic tradition, there is no mention of Abraha's expedition, including from Abraha's own inscriptions. So it looks like this would be something that the Muslims made up. Now, African war elephants, according to the histories that I checked, have not been used in the region for over 600 years, according to Daniel Beck. Actually, let me just find Daniel Beck's book. I've got it somewhere. Oh, no. So let's go to here, John Kistler, War Elephants. This is actually a book on war elephants, and they discuss that here. Right, John Kistler, War Elephants. I went and found that reference. So it is difficult to explain how Abraha would have gotten a hold of African war elephants in Arabia. Furthermore, Quran 105 appears to be appealing to traditions from the book of Maccabees and not referencing any expedition on Abraha's part. So it is referencing other biblical texts. And notice here, Al-Baydawi said it has been reported that the Battle of the Elephant took place in the year of the Prophet's birth. And so the story goes. He went forth with his army, having with him a strong elephant named Mahmud, which is little Muhammad. And the elephant was white, and it was a she-elephant. And when he prepared to enter Mecca, the elephant arrived, and whenever they pointed the elephant towards Mecca, it knelt down and remained there because out of reverence for Muhammad, who was born in Mecca, the elephant refused to make war. Great story, right, guys?
Yeah. By the way, Mahmoud means the praised one in the Arabic one, like Muhammad, but the one who is, the praised one. I was going to ask a question earlier. What about other building of Kaaba, which we had in the Saudi Arabia Peninsula? Are you going to get into it at all?
A lot of those were destroyed. I mean, there was a Kaaba in Yemen that was destroyed, and there were other Kaabas I've mentioned that were very different shapes and styles, very Persian in style and shape. Many of these are gone basically. So these have been destroyed. They've systematically destroyed a lot of this stuff. We've spoken about some of this. Yeah, the elephants are Muslim. The elephants are Muslim too. You're right, artsy fartsy nerdy woody. Yeah.
So then this elephant actually, yes, when he's pointed towards Mecca, he kneels down. So except that the direction of praying towards Mecca appears like pretty much 100 years after that. So the direction had not been abrogated yet. So not only this story is, they keep inserting these things in all of the stories. Everyone is a Muslim, even the elephant.
Well, there you go. And they assumed its gender, which I find offensive. So the commentators record no unanimity on this matter. Okay, Abraha's invasion and Muhammad's birth are often dated to 570. Qurtubi is representative in presenting sources that equate the year of the elephant with Muhammad's birth, as well as those that place Abraha's attack, 23 years or 40 years earlier. So it could be in 570, could be in 530, could be in 547. Oh my, that's very precise. That's extremely. That's like 5 minutes difference.
That is the norm now. Now we come back to the real circle of numbers and locations. Scholars disagree. I give you a bunch of dates and a bunch of locations, and Allah knows best. Yes, indeed. Allahu A'lam.
Yeah, the elephants have to pay zakat. I mean, pity Abraha didn't use a duck, because when the duck has to pay zakat, the duck could just say, "Look, can you just put that on my bill?" So, various Western scholars like Noldecker, Lammens, and Blachère pointed out the inconsistencies within early Arabic sources and the contradictions between them. So yeah, so the elephants invaded in the year Muhammad was born, which is 570, maybe 530, maybe 547, who knows? Allah knows BS. Let's continue. Now, we're throwing out a whole bunch of ideas here. A stone carving of a Christian figure found in Zafar, 581 miles south of the holy city, thought to have been made in the era of the Prophet Muhammad. Pagans indeed, but it looks like we have Christian kings being referenced here in, oh my God, the stone carving found in Yemen, and the surrounding area was once under Christian rule. And he dated this to a man with change in jewelry, curls, and spherical eyes to around 530 AD. Interesting. Your thoughts, guys, because that matches one of the dates that Qurtubi provided.
That's interesting. When it comes to these sort of findings, they are, I think, most of the ones that I have seen, they are very recent. I think probably there have been a lot of things found that prove that the Arabian Peninsula had been Christianized, and they're destroyed, of course. But now we're starting to see, oh, look, this thing is found. There was a church over here and these sort of things. But before these things never came out, God only knows how many things have been destroyed.
And add to this, why we don't find anything about Muhammad like you see about things before Muhammad? I mean, the later you go in history, you should have more material, more evidence, more archaeological to prove whatever you want to talk about. But we don't see that.
Yeah, you find Yemeni gods and records going back 5,500 years. But you find Jack for Muhammad. Isn't that insane?
I believe we have zero evidence of that. You know, I was talking to the manager here at the station. I said to him today, I am more convinced today that Muhammad never exists than I have ever before in my life. And I love the show, Lloyd. I have to go down to the station, but I will be watching the rest of this. I want to learn more as we go.
So lots of requests. Someone says, please write a book showing how modern Muslim Quran translations like Da'if International intentionally mistranslate the Quran to hide its flaws. We can do a show on that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Love you guys. God bless. I'll watch this. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I want to put you on the bottom, Jay-Z. So, Artsy Fartsy Nerdy Wordy is shocked that Muslims stole something from the Christians. She said they've never done that. Well, what kind of voodoo and witchcraft is this? I'm shocked myself.
Well, actually, my whole point and the whole reason why I'm here is because, in my humble opinion, Islam came from, well, not from Christianity, but from Christian Gnosticism, which passes itself off as Christian, but is actually very much pagan and very much anti-Christian. But it has a veneer, and similarly, Islam, I think, started out having this Christian veneer, which is why you have these Christian images.
Yeah, yes. There's a guy called Quranic End Game, and he says the female elephant was called Nelly the elephant. She packed the bags and she went to the circus, I think, probably. So yeah, you had Mahmud the elephant. So you had a female elephant with a male elephant name. Okay, fine, whatever you say, Muhammad, whatever you say. How's it, Thunderous? Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
So White elephant, what year again? So according to some of the histories, when the people of Mecca had fled the city, seeing the approach of Abraha's army, the lead elephant named Mahmud stopped, kneeled down, and wouldn't go further. The rest of the elephants would not go without the leader. So the whole formation came to a halt. Mahmud was beaten, because that's what you do when you're a Muslim, I guess. At least that's what you assume would happen, right? Because that's what Muslims would do. Mahmud was beaten. And why would Christians have an elephant named Mahmud? Can anyone tell me? JC, do you have any reasons? Thunderous, any thoughts why Christian armies would have an elephant called Muhammad, basically?
Well, I don't know about that, but the first thing that came into my mind when you look at the narrative, it reminds me of the donkey on its way and having a confrontation with Balaam, and the donkey was beaten and it wouldn't move any further. There seems to be a very similar story here, where one is a plagiarism of the other.
That's a fair thought. JC, any thoughts from you?
No, I mean, the whole thing with the elephant, I just thought was most likely the whole thing a fabrication. They wanted some excuse. I don't know, but I keep listening to these stories that there was an elephant around Mecca. I don't think that an elephant would get that close. I mean, they drink a lot of water, so I think it would have died before leaving Yemen.
These were camelephants. These were camelephants, and they like a hybrid camel elephant, and so they just don't exist anymore. But true story, camelephants.
Yeah, look, if you can have magical flying donkeys, you can have magical elephants.
So Ben says no elephant in a jazz. Every elephant needs 70 liters of water per day. Right, but these are camelephants. Don't forget, Thunderous.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you look at other stories in the Quran or even in Islam for that, you have to take 2 or 3 stories that exist elsewhere and take certain components of them to get where you are in the Quran. So in this instance, you can clearly see Baal's donkey, a similarity there. It's now where do you get the other components like white or the elephant and Muhammad's name? Or Mahmud, when you can derive those things, then you can extrapolate certain features of those narratives and put it into this one. That's what is coming out here to me.
You can do it too. Nailed it down. It was Aleph ants. They were very small, so they didn't need 70 liters.
Those would have been Solomon's ants, because according to Islam, Solomon spoke to ants before he trod on them.
Janice says this just gets worse and worse. Janice, this is Islam we're talking about. This is the word of Allah. Okay, this is the writing of Allah. Like, how can you not take it seriously? Yeah, but the good point, Andres. Good point. Now, Waqidi gives a tradition that there were 13 elephants with the army, besides the famous one called Mahmud, the woman with the man's name. And the latter was the only one that escaped death from the shower of stones. But this would seem to oppose the tradition on the subject. That's the Muslim tradition. Waqidi adds that Abraha sent to Abyssinia for the famous elephant Mahmud expressly to join his expedition. And that's William Muir, The Life of Muhammad, Volume 1. Let's continue. The lead elephant was white, a white elephant. So just so you guys know, this was a white elephant. And known as Mahmud, MHMWD, so very close to Muhammad. It stopped at the boundary of Mecca, refused to enter. Now, archaeological discoveries in South Arabia suggest that the year of elephant may have been 569 or 568, as the Sasanian Empire overthrew the Aksumite rulers in Yemen. According to Muhammad Assad, the surah in the Quran does not describe birds literally carrying small rocks. He goes to Al-Zamakhshari and Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, and he says the words used, namely the stones of Sijil, denote a writing, something that has been decreed by Allah. So did the birds drop stones? But no, he says no, it's actually a writing, something decreed. Namely, right, he further explains that this decree by Allah was a very sudden epidemic outbreak, which according to Ibn Ishaq caused fever and smallpox. So this, Assad concludes, points to the fact that the stone-hard blows of chastisement preordained were sudden epidemic due to the fact that the word for fever, hasba, means primarily pelting or smiting with stones in the famous Arabic dictionary Al-Qamus by Firuzabadi. And the word ta'ir can denote any flying creature, not just birds. It could even be insects. So they're taking these words and they're taking a little bit of, shall we say, creative liberty. JC, you're an author. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm just thinking whether they were trying to create something like this elephant was Muhammad pre-incarnation. So like first he was incarnated in an elephant and then he becomes a prophet. Whole thing is just nonsense, particularly when we know that Muhammad, even according to the narrative, he was a pagan until he was 40 years old. So the whole thing is just insane. And also, why this obsession with animals? Did the church fathers write stories about the donkey that Jesus rode into Jerusalem? Is
We need
that a
to
thing in
ask,
the ancient times?
is the white elephant in the room with you right now? So is there evidence that the Christian Trinity has pagan roots from Babylon? I'm not sure if you're trolling or trying to distract. I mean, that's not the topic here today. But I don't know.
Just when it goes into the paragraph, it says something decreed by Allah. He further explained that this decreed by Allah is a very sudden epidemic outbreak. Do you know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like to me when the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant and they brought it forward before their God. So one night, I think forgive me, I know it either fell on its face the first night. The second night, its head and its hands were chopped off. And then on the third night, the Philistines... Yahweh gave the Philistines an outbreak of piles, specifically for the Philistines, and they brought the Ark of the Covenant back to the nation of Israel. I can't help but think, is this some kind of variation, yet again, where they've extrapolated something from the Bible, where Yahweh broke out or decreed a disease?
This is like the plagues visited on Moses, right? With Moses and Pharaoh. Yeah, it seems very reminiscent. But to answer the question that was asked here, just a moment, Thunderous, I don't think so. I mean, look, I have discussed in the past. I just cannot remember offhand, all of a sudden. But the idea of the Trinity, if you go back to Jewish history, you'll find thousands of years ago, right? The Jews were talking about a Trinity. And of course, when Christianity developed, they started to make, shall we say, little changes to their documentation. I'll get to you in a moment. But the whole Jewish idea of God influenced a lot of people around them. So you might want to ask, did it come from the Jews first and then got corrupted by other regions? But that's something that's maybe worth talking about it, you wanted to say, Emmanuel?
Yeah, I agree. The guy is obviously a Muslim troll.
No, he's not. He's someone asked him, so it's cool. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, but maybe they're not him personally, but I've heard that from Muslims so many times. I think he's legit.
No, I think he's legit. So it's hard to tell in context.
That. And actually, just the other day, just like 2 days ago, someone gave me a book, or rather, indirectly gave me a book, and it was a book from the cult I grew up in, and they argued the same thing. The whole book was just about attacking the Catholic Church. And it didn't say that it was from that cult. It just said, it's such a weird book. It doesn't even have an author. It's just a book with no author. Yeah. They don't say who they are, but they are the cult I grew up in. And the entire time they just attack the Catholic Church. And one of the main quote unquote arguments they use is exactly that. They claim that the Trinity would have pagan origins, and then by extension they claim, because the Trinity would have pagan origins, the Catholic Church would have pagan origins. That's basically the entire claim in their book. It's like 500 pages, but that's basically the main claim. That's what it boils down to. That's the only real argument they have, and it's not really a real argument. And this is so typical. And this was made by a pagan Gnostic cult. They are the pagans, yet they accuse the Catholic Church of being pagans. And then they show pictures in the book. I even made a video about it where I show the pictures. They have like pictures from from female pagan deities, goddesses, where where the goddess has a child, and they claim, oh, this is where the idea of Mary comes from. Again, confusing the Trinity and thinking that the Trinity would include Mary for some reason. But
Yeah,
you know,
we discussed
the
that.
exact same argument, and it's an argument that's made in Gnosticism. This argument comes from Gnosticism, and Muslims make the exact same argument.
Which is interesting. Yeah, we discussed also, Mickham says that triads of gods, not trinities. These are different individuals, not the concept of the Trinity is unique to the Christian, or shall we say Judeo-Christian view. If you go into I can't remember the name of the Jewish text now, but if you go into it, the Jews before Christianity were openly speaking of a Trinity. It's just that post-Christianity, the Jews kind of, shall we say, stepped away from that. But yeah, let's not go too far off topic.
May I just
No.
add one thing first? Well, on the Trinity, I think we should do a show one day. I'm preparing some things as well, so maybe we can talk about that. But on this one, when it says about the epidemics, the 6th century was full with epidemics actually appearing here and there. Then again, in the 7th century, in ancient history, it happened all the time, and before the Black Death, and they were really quite catastrophic. But the 6th century, they had lots. People very often would see something like this and say it's a punishment from God. But it is easy to see how something bad happens, and people would say, okay, this is because of God, and then they create a lot of legends around it. So you could actually think that a pandemic or an epidemic would happen in reality because they were happening all the time.
Right. Also, Artsy Fartsy says that gods came in threes, which is reminiscent of Baal, Ishtar, and Moloch. But also you had the moon, the sun, and the stars. So the father, the mother, and the children. Right? The father, the mother, the child. They have this family unit style thing. Whereas the Trinity is very different concept. So, but look, I mean, that's something we can tackle another time.
Can I ask a question on this, Lloyd, about, so just so I understand this correctly, this is the year Muhammad is born, and a flock of elephants, or whatever the group name title is, some elephants come to Mecca, and the chief elephant, Mahmud, bows down and won't enter Mecca because this is what Muhammad is born at this time, or because Muhammad is going to be born in the city?
He was born, I think. I think he was born.
So if we assume that he was born at that time, then why is it the elephant knows about Muhammad, but nobody else knows about Muhammad for 40 years? But for 40 years, Muhammad didn't even know, his mother didn't know, his father didn't know, his community didn't know, he himself didn't even know. It was only after the experience in the cave that his wife put things together. She herself knew more about the situation than he did. So why is there a blanket silence for that period of 40 years before anybody found out that Muhammad is a prophet, though the elephant knew that Muhammad was a prophet? And who else would have recognized this elephant was standing there for this particular reason? Because the story has no meaning.
Nobody, exactly. It makes no sense. It only makes sense after the fact as a story to embellish Muhammad's presence or something. That's why it's a fictional story. In a Shia hadith,
I think you will find that it makes perfect sense. So when Jesus was born, Allah sent a star, and when Muhammad was born, Allah sent an elephant.
Yeah, but there was witnesses. There was witnesses to the star. You had the Magi from the distant land, and Herod also was familiar with it, and there were other witnesses to this as well. Whereas this story is just something that's been added on retrospectively to give credibility to Muhammad. What I don't understand is
the elephant was sent by Allah to contact Muhammad. The elephant was trying to make a trunk call. Right.
Your puns are terrible.
I know. So in a Shia hadith, Imam Ali was born in the 30th year of the elephant, and he died in after Hijrah 40. Some scholars place the year of the elephant 1 or 2 decades earlier than 570. So it could be 560, could be 550. And they place it before the birth of Muhammad's father as well. So in this tradition attributed to Ibn Shihab al-Sukhri in the works of Abdul Razak and al-San'ani, the whole incident happened before the birth of Muhammad's father. So the attack on Mecca happened, this would be like before Muhammad's father was even born. Yeah?
This reminds me a lot of the story you mentioned with the cats, where Muslims claim that cats won't touch or will out of reverence for the Quran will not touch the Quran. Yeah, it's just obviously made up, and it's not
Yep.
true. And my cats. They have no trust me, they have no reverence for the Quran at all.
Yep.
They yeah. But let's not get into this. But I also want to mention um at that time, even if we were to assume it was actually at the time of Muhammad's birth, and not before his birth, but at the time of his birth, as is the claim, then even at that time, Mecca was still pagan, and the Kaaba was a pagan shrine. So the elephant would have bowed down to a pagan shrine, not to an Islamic one.
Another good point. Yeah. So yeah, look, I think we've maybe spoken enough on this particular topic. It's retarded. I mean, the story is clearly made up after the fact to try to ascribe some kind of meaning and significance to a legend that clearly happened long before Muhammad was born, as far as we can
But do
tell.
you not find that this story is just typical of Islam, where it mentions something with no detail and that's it? I mean, this little account is very reminiscent of, say, Dhul Qarnayn. He was on a road to somewhere, he got somewhere, then he went on a road to another place, then he went on a road to another place, met a bunch of people, did something, then he carried on about his business. No detail at all.
Yep. No, it was the elephant prophet predicting Muhammad. Yeah, no, exactly. It's common. So just as in the book War Elephants, the one I showed earlier by John Kistler, just as Muslims ascribe religious sensitivity to the elephants that refused to attack Mecca, it should also be noted that they borrowed this from previous legends, as they always do. Christians ascribe piety to some elephants visiting Byzantium or Constantinople. John of Ephesus wrote that the elephants raised their trunks and signed the cross whenever they passed a Christian church to thank God for helping them in battle. One must wonder if the Mahouts taught the elephants some Christian sensibilities for the visit to Byzantium. Now, look, I think we can tell that this is either they really trained those elephants well, or those elephants, this is a shaggy dog story. So the Muslims seem to have borrowed this idea and adapted it for their own purposes into another elephant shaggy dog story. So there you go. Just so you know, this would seem to me to be a little bit fanciful. So the haram. Now, among the Bedouin, the sacred area around a shrine. So the idea of a haram, a masjid al-haram, comes long before Islam from the Bedouins, right? This is a place where holy power manifests, right? It is the sacred territory of Mecca as well. So Mecca comes after, right? But in terms of the Bedouins, they were pagans. Long before Muhammad was born, these people were pagans. Al-Haramain, the two holy places. Al-Haram, Ain, right? The two holy places. Usually Mecca and Medina. Now, this is from the Encyclopedia of Islam that we're looking at here, but also Jerusalem and Hebron. Now, why Hebron? Well, that's where Abraham was settled. Jerusalem and Hebron. JC, does this sound a little bit like the Jerusalem thesis? Because the two holy places are not just Mecca and Medina. It looks like it's now Jerusalem. Now, that's odd that they have to mark that as two holy places.
Yeah, they needed two places, and we know that the whole thing with Medina being called Yathrib, and it is attested, we know that city was there, and then lo and behold, it changed its name. It's like, okay, so they needed two different places, and they just made them appear, one by renaming a city nearby, and the other one invented out of nowhere. So very curious.
Yep. In Surah 4, 125, Abraham is described as Hanif, and it is stated in addition that God took him as a friend. So hence the later designation of Hebron, the alleged burial place of Abraham, as Al-Khalil, because friend here, Khalil, right? That's in the Encyclopedia of Islam, volume 3, page 980, side B. And we've got here, it was not until the Hijrah that Muhammad, on the occasion of his controversy with the Jews, pronounced the Old Testament patriarch, that's Abraham, a Hanif and the first Muslim. So Muhammad is the first Muslim. His wife Khadija was the first Muslim. Dhul Qarnayn, this is Alexander the Great, who came but 900 years before Muhammad or something. He was the first Muslim. there were a lot of first Muslims. This is kind of weird, but it's only after the Jews rejected Muhammad that historically he suddenly turned around and said, yeah, but Abraham is a Hanif, he's the first Muslim. And then he made up the story that with Ishmael, he built the Kaaba. So this story only came after the Jews told him to get lost. Yes?
Also, by the way...
sorry, go ahead.
JC?
So yes, briefly, that also Ali is the first Muslim, also Bilal is the first Muslim, also Abu Bakr is the first Muslim. And if you keep reading the Al-Tabari, you'll see that everyone was the first Muslim.
Actually, as we all know, the first Muslim was Adam, and that's actually also something they borrowed from the Alkacites. They claimed, well, actually, they didn't claim that that Adam was the first Muslim, obviously, or that he was a prophet. Well, no. Actually, they did. They did claim that he was a prophet because they regard Jesus, like the Muslims, they regard Jesus as a prophet, and they regard Adam as the first reincarnation. They believe Jesus reincarnates and can even reincarnate as any of us, akin to the Christ consciousness concept. We all can be Christ, right? So and actually they regard Adam as a prophet because they say Jesus was a prophet and he reincarnated as Adam first. And so I think this is also very similar, right? So yeah, I think they got that from them as well.
So Abraham, always according to Snook Gronier, became only at this juncture. Now, this is according to multiple Western scholars. It's only at this point, after the Jews reject Muhammad, that suddenly he claims that because they are the religion of pure monotheism, propagated by Abraham, he was a Muslim and he was a Hanif, and they are following the way of Abraham. And then they assert priority over both Judaism, founded by Moses, and Christianity, founded by Jesus, because they are using the religion of the patriarch Abraham, who comes before Jesus and before Moses. So this is the kind of game that Islam plays. Now, Haramain is the dual form of Haram, meaning the two sanctuaries, right? And it also refers to Jerusalem and Hebron. And then also notice the word Haram. Now, we spoke of previously of the connection to the pyramids and to Egypt and Egyptian religion, and to, as we discussed last week as well, with the Hermeticists, with the Hermetic gods of Egypt, right? With Thoth, the god Thoth. And notice the Haram also means pyramid. So we started previously with the idea of pyramid, the Haram in the pyramid, and you're back to the pyramid religion, back to the Egyptian mystery religions. Yes.
Well, actually, there you have your quote unquote pagan trinity, right? Right there with Hermes Trismegistus. He could be, well, he's not a trinity, but he is kind of, right? He's one god, but he is separated into three forms, right? So it's nothing like the Christian concept of the Trinity, right? But that's kind of what they claim, like right there with Hermes Trismegistus, except of course that these pagan elements actually influenced Islam much more than they did Christianity.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so I was hoping Osama was going to be here for this discussion, but I'll try to be brief on this point. So Sharia basically allows Muslims to follow a certain set of rules that brings their lives in line with the will of Allah, right? The word Muslim means that a Muslim is Sharia compliant, and the word Muslim contains its Arabic meaning and definition, right? So the word Muslim in Arabic has two parts: the mu prefix, mu, and the triliteral root of the word Islam, salim, right? I've already covered salim, which means graven idol, right? The word Islam comes from the root for graven idol, to worship a graven idol, salim, right? And In Islam today, of course, it's a word that means submission, but when you prefix the word mu, right, to such a root in Arabic, the resulting noun means a person who does the thing that the root word denotes, right? A Muslim will do, this is someone who does salim. And salim in this, of course, in Arabic, modern Arabic, submits, great and well. But prior, it meant graven idol. So we could perhaps infer this means someone who bows to a graven idol. But you submit to what? Allah's will, which is the Sharia, Islamic law. Now, previously you submitted to the idol, right, in the Kaaba. So now this, a Muslim is by definition a Sharia adherent, because that's what the word means. If someone claims to be a Muslim or converts to Islam, was born into Islam, but does not apostatize or separate from it, then it is reasonable to conclude that person is Sharia compliant. Therefore, we have to assume that all Muslims are Sharia compliant. So assume so until they prove otherwise. Just keep that in mind, right? And if someone does not submit to the Sharia, right, then this does not meet the linguistic definition of a Muslim. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to skip over that. Okay, so it's important to remember that the caliphate is a governmental system, right? An imamate, right? It's a theocratic system. It's law, culture, warfare, theology, and so on. All of it, right? And they have to replace by means of jihad any and all political systems not governed by the Sharia. Oh, wow. Thank you very much. Nada Hoffnung. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please let us know what that was for. Thank you. So let's continue. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, let us continue. So makaraba. Now, you have the what. Now you've got the ma and the mu. We've just looked at the word mu, someone who does the thing, right? The word makaraba is derived easily from mukaraba, right? Now we go back to Yemen. We go back to the warrior priest kings of Yemen. And this is the makaraba that people claim was originally Mecca from Ptolemy. The mukaraba are the priest kings who served the will, right? Mukma, someone who follows Muslim, muqaraba, makoraba, right? The priest kings who served the will of Allah. And Allah, for these Yemenis, was known as the god Makkah. Makkah, also known as the Babylonian moon god Shin, Swen, right? Sin, also known as Allah. Any comments from you guys? Any thoughts before I continue?
No,
I'm
fine.
good.
Yeah, but does it all make sense? Does the logic hold here? The term ma, mu. It just used to be ma, and in modern Arabic it became mu. So,
Yeah.
So under Islam, you have a caliphate under the Khalifa. The leader is the Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? The Amir al-Mu'mineen is the commander of the believers, right? Adopted by Umar on his election as caliph, right? And it was used as the title of the caliph until the end of the caliphate. Amir al-Muslimin, right? Amir al-Mu'mineen versus Amir al-Muslimin, the commander of the Muslims. Now, oddly enough, this was a title used by the Almoravids, right? By the Almoravids. Now, Amir al-Muslimin is the Lord of the Muslims, a title which the Almoravids first assumed in distinction to the title Amir al-Mu'mineen. So we had an actual distinction between the Muslims and the Mu'mineen, the believers, a general group of believers. So the latter title was borne by independent dynasties. The Almoravids recognized the supremacy of the Abbasids. So the Abbasids were of the believer group, and they didn't want to arrogate to themselves the title of the caliphs. So they established a sub-caliphate with a title of their own. They called themselves the Muslims. So here you've got a little caliphate forming under the Almoravids, who called themselves Muslims, versus the ones who follow the way of the believers. So there was actually a difference between the believers and the Muslims, at least. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
Go on.
I'll say, I think, unless I'm very wrong about this, that the earliest inscriptions found that have the word like Muslim are in the 700s. I don't think they happened during the time of Muhammad for nearly 100 years.
Yeah, when did the Almoravids, when did they exist? Let me just check. 1050s to 1157. So it got established very late. So yeah, so they got established very late. So the term really came into common use rather late. Yeah, the word Muslim wasn't around early. So keep that in mind, right? Now the word Malik, Abdul Malik and Muqarraba. So early first millennium BC, the political leaders were the Maliks or the Malik, right? And they created a commonwealth occupying most of South Arabia. And they took the title Muqarrab Saba, right? The Muqarrab of the Sabaeans. The Muqarrab of the Sabaeans. And the Muqarriban were the special retainers of the ruler. So the Makoraba clearly is referring here. So the whole idea of the Muqarraba as ones who followed, right? The idea clearly comes from Yemen in this case. And the word mu is simply borrowed from Muqarrab, a unifier. So the Muqarrab was a unifier. Literally, the word means unifier, to unify, right? And in ancient Yemen, it's a sovereign superior to the kings. And they speak of many impressive buildings in southern Arabia with temples to pagan deities. And the earlier rulers of Sabah wore the title of Muqarrab, which combined the functions of prince and priest. These were theocracies that existed long before Muhammad came around. So a Muqarrab was a priest king. So the whole concept of the Muslim and so on, all of this comes from previous dynasties, previous ideas, long before Muhammad. So Muqarraba is a plural. It's the Romanized form of Makoraba. Muqarraba. Yeah, any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
Just on Abdul Malik, that the title means, it's supposed to mean servant of the king, which is a very odd title for somebody who is the caliph. So basically, he has no one above him. So that one can argue it was something to do with Jesus, and he was basically servant of the king, and that was something to do with Jesus. In one of the coins that Mel showed on his channel, that is Abdul, it was always understood as Abdul Malik carrying a flaming sword, but he has unpacked that coin, and it actually looks like an image of the angel of the Lord, basically Jesus, with the flaming sword. So it is possible that during the early times of Abdul Malik, he was a heretical Christian, but is still Christian, and that's where his name comes from. It's obviously very difficult to actually figure that out, but it does sound like that's possible.
Yeah, but you've got this Jewish Christian sort of idea, and then it transplants itself into Arabia, which is dominated by the idea of the Muqarraba. So then they've got to fuse these ideas of this existing state, which is run on these theocratic principles, infused with the ideas of Christianity that they stole from heretical Judaism and Christianity as well. So that's kind of the idea that I'm getting. Andrew Martin says, yeah, this is why the Muslims assert that fitna is like rebellion against the government, because it is. It's rebellion against the Islamic government, against Muhammad, the priest king, and that's also true. And Mo is the priest king, right? The priest of Allah, the king over the Muslims. So yeah, any thoughts from you, Thunderous?
No, fine, thank you. Other than the priest king, the idea of a priest king, isn't that Melchizedek? He was a priest king as well.
And we mentioned him earlier, right? We did mention him earlier. So yeah, there's like a lot of these ideas that seem to be filtering through. And Villainous says, priest king, control through religion and politics, a whole of life ideology, We've heard that before. Yeah, Islam. Exactly. Okay, so Muqarrab Malik al-Makkah. So this could mean the place of refuge. And the inscription placed in the wall of the temple relates that Yada el-Darikh, son of Sumu Ali and Muqarrab of Sabah, erected the wall of Awam, the house of al-Makkah. So al-Makkah or Makkah, right, as a place existed under these Muqarrabs, right? So the Muqarrabs were already present in Makkah, the house of Makkah. interesting thoughts, just the commonality of these terms as you see them over time. And they speak of al-Sabiqun, the foregoers, a term applied in Shiism to the Prophet, right? And early on, I skipped over something which is used in Sunni Islam, which is also the first of God's creatures to respond to the demand, am I not your Lord? And this idea is, I skipped over it earlier, but it's very present within Sunni Islamic theology as well. And the term derives from the Quran, but notice they speak of al-Sabiqun, and muqarrabun, right? Wal-Sabiqun, al-Sabiqun, ulaika al-muqarrabun. So the Quran actually refers to the muqarraba directly here. And the examples also of verbal usage. How could we not be superior to the angels since we preceded them? Sabaqnahum. So these people are the muqarrabs who are superior to the angels because they preceded the angels. And earlier I mentioned here, the first of God's creatures to respond to the demand, am I not your Lord? The Sabiqun. And Sabiqun, the foregoers in Shiism, so foregoers, and that sounds a lot like people from Sabah. Any thoughts from you guys?
Well, if the story with the elephant is true, then actually the elephants would have been the first creature to respond to Allah demanding to worship Him.
Yep. So South Arabia, Yemen, led by Muqarrab, a sovereign superior to the kings, whose name means unifier, right? And then you have the building of the temple of Makkah, the great god of the Sabaeans, in the center of the town, like the Kaaba. Makkah, again, we have Makkah. And then in South Arabia, the kingdom of Sheba, its capital at Marib, was the leading state in the first millennium BC. It was a tribal confederation headed by a ruler given the title Muqarrib. And a Solomon and Queen of Sheba would need, so hold on. The early chronology of the Sabaean state is obscure due to the lack of early datable inscriptions or links with events outside southern Arabia. The Solomon and Queen of Sheba synchronism would need to be in the 10th century BC, but the queen is not otherwise attested as a historical figure. There's no reference to the queen in any Sabaean inscriptions, although the queen of the Arabs are cited in several 8th century Assyrian inscriptions. So just something interesting, point of interest. Okay, now I want to go to, we've spoken about these mu'minin, the believers, right? Mu'minin. So that's an Arabization of the Hebrew ha-manim, right? And this is the benediction concerning heretics, right? And the Berkat ha-manim is where the Jews spoke of heretics. So manin is the plural, right? Mu'minin, and the believers, right? So manin, mu'minin, and these are the believers. So you have the min, singular. So the Muslimin, the mu'minin, the Amir al-mu'minin. So the Arabs, when the Jews said, you guys are heretics, the Arabs simply said, yeah, we'll take the name, and they became the believers. No, we're not the heretics, we're the believers. So they took the idea of the ha-manim, and they became the mu'minin. So in Hebrew, the word min, the root min, is heretic. And in Arabic, the min is a believer. So one who believes this, one who follows this. So the Hebrews called them heretics. The Arabs said, no, we are believers. So mu is just the prefix assigning the next word to the person as one who, so min is a heretic, which the Arabs then simply assigned to believer. So there you go. So manin is the Arabized version of manim, the heretical believers. Any thoughts, guys?
So they're heretical and they're proud of that. Okay, cool. Come to voices. Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, but the words overlap. So again, so it's a little bit complex here, but Muqarrab, Arabic priest kings or federators. So it's a political and military title. You rule with use of force. In the 4th century, the title was replaced by Malik, or king, Abd al-Malik, right? And this is the title of the ruler who was primary over the tribes and linked by a covenant. The Muqarrab is a South Arabian hegemon, head of a confederation of South Arabian shabs headed by the king, the Malik. And it is clear that early 800 to 400 BC, political authority resided with one leader, a Malik or king, appointed as Muqarrab of a council of tribal leaders. He issued edicts that carried out decisions by the council, presided over building projects, ritual hunts, and sacrifices. Some of the most famous inscriptions record the military conquests of the Muqarrabs, who were evidently quite successful in confederating tribal groups through the rites of pilgrimage. For instance, at Jabal al-Loth, which is a mountain. And so they did pilgrimage, and they used such social cohesion to conscript military forces. And here you've got a template taken from these Yemenis that is very, very similar to what the Caliph does in Islam. That's my point. So, thoughts?
Yeah, this whole thing about people going to one place, and that's how you get armies, that actually makes sense. It's also part of the whole thing with Petra, that a place where you have to form an army would have to be a trade center. So you have people, you give them money, they join your army. Mecca is not a very good fit for that. Petra actually is, but so is like Yemen, for instance.
Yep, no, exactly. But can you see the kind of parallels, the things that foreshadow Islam? The model, the political model, is not in is Christianity like this? Does this speak of Christianity? Do you see Christianity being modeled here? Do you see
No.
Judaism being modeled here?
No.
I very much see Christian Gnosticism being modeled here, but I already very much made the point that Christian Gnosticism isn't Christian at all. It borrows that name. It claims to be Christian, just like Muslims claim to follow Jesus, but it's only a veneer.
Yep. So the hegemon is a hegemon over a political state. I mean, I see here a model for Islam. This is a model for the Islamic caliphate, right? So having dominant influence or authority over others, that's the caliph, one possessing hegemony. Okay, let's have a look at Baal or Hubal, right? And Ha-Malak, right? Molech. Hubal in the Arabic was a god worshipped in pre-Islamic Arabia, mentioned in the Bible as well, right? In pre-Islamic Makkah, there was a temple to the moon god Hubal. The two Greek manuscripts of the Periplus use Latinized Carabel, right? So the name represents a transcription of the Sabaean name Karabel, blessed by or following God. So let me see. Mukaraba, right? Mu-ma, Makoraba, one who, Mu, one who, Karabal, one who follows the god Baal, one who is blessed by Baal. Mukarabal, Mukaraban, Mukaraba, right? So this is a name shared by numerous South Arabian rulers, right? Which means blessed by or following Baal. Now the question is, which leader do we know of, which religious founder was consecrated to Hubal, otherwise known as Baal, in the Kaaba in Mecca by his grandfather? Any guesses? Well, Muhammad, of course. So hu or huwa in English, hu or huwa in Arabic, meaning he. Okay, so Hubal, he who, right? Again, that this person does that thing, right? It's a pronoun, it's a name for Allah in Sufism. So the name Huwa is a name for Allah in Sufism. Hu, okay? Hu, Baal as well, don't forget, that's the prefix of the name Baal. Literally, Hebrew and Arabic for the third person, that's used to avoid attribution of a grammatical gender to Allah. So they try to make Allah sexless. But Hawi, plural, Hawiyun or Huwa, in Arabic also means a snake charmer or a conman. A mountebank is a conman. So the word Huwa, interesting, is the Sufi name for Allah, but it also means a conman, oddly enough. Any thoughts, guys?
You already know this, Lloyd, but this is the reason why to this day Islam uses the star and crescent as its symbol, and that's why you call it a moon god. It is a pagan planetary deity. Baal was a main pagan planetary deity, and the star and crescent was its symbol.
Right, and Allah is the greatest of deceivers, and accordingly, Huwa, according to the highest scholars in Islam, Allah is a con man. Exactly, Dylan.
Right, with this, one of the things that I would add is, because this is in Sufism, I would actually probably interpret this as they have noticed that in the Quran, often there is this who and huwa doing stuff. And if it is just he doing stuff, it becomes quite clear that the book is talking about Jesus and sometimes the Holy Spirit, and that's not good. So by saying that who all of a sudden is Allah, they remove that problem, because otherwise you
Mhm.
read it and you say, oh, look, this is actually very Christian. And there are some places like Surah 47 verse 2. So Sufis, they are deceitful in that manner.
True that they are, but notice also al-makr, right? Just the fact of we've just been speaking about the muqarraba, right? Muqarraban. And here you've got makr, and then you've got the greatest of deceivers, and you've got this word as well linking us to con man. It just kind of just these links are just. If I wish that Osama was here so we could speak about it. I was hoping he's going to be on for longer, but it's just that it's just these linguistic connections. You know, this consistency of this linguistic connections, just to me, are just saying something.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if you have it here in the presentation. I saw once Sam Shamoun, he was taking one of the surahs at the end of the Quran. I can't remember which one it was, and unpacking it and saying, well, this is actually about Hubal all the time. So I don't know if you have it here. Otherwise, maybe we can have a look at that video for the
Yeah.
next presentation.
Sure. Okay. So, after decades of scholarship denying that the Carthaginians sacrificed their children, new research has found overwhelming evidence that this ancient civilization really did carry out the practice of child sacrifice, right? And there are these ancient burial grounds, right, which scholars try to pass off as just child cemeteries, but it turns out no, they were doing child sacrifice on a
Sacrificial urns. It's not the one where they found like hundreds of urns with the sacrificial, but they were sacrificed to Molech.
yes.
And I think one of the comments from one of the archaeologists who was a theist was they were surprised, given that the type of sacrifices and the brutality that was taking place, that it took the nation of Israel 200 years before they decided to wipe out the Canaanites, because that's one of the criticisms that many people don't seem to understand, that God, the God of the Bible is this merciless tyrant.
They waited like 400 years, to
but he waited, and there was the comment was, I was surprised he waited that long.
Yeah. So scholars obviously didn't want to, shall we say, the Carthaginians, this fine ancient group, and they wanted to say these guys were squeaky clean, walked on water. And it turns out they're a bunch of murdering psychopaths, right? So Josephine Quinn of Oxford University's Faculty of Classics said, it is clear that the stories about Carthaginian child sacrifice are true. This is something the Romans and Greeks said that the Carthaginians did, and it was part of the popular history of Carthage in the 18th and 19th century. Children, male and female, mostly a few weeks old, were sacrificed at locations known as tofits. The practice was carried out by their neighbors at other Phoenician colonies in Sicily, Sardinia, and Malta. And dedications from the children's parents to the gods are inscribed on slabs of stone above the cremated remains, ending with the explanation that the gods, or gods concerned, had heard my voice and blessed me. And they worshipped a god called Baal Hamon, the face of Baal. Right? Now, I just want you to note Hubal. We've spoken of Hubal, and at some point we'll get to where Muhammad is literally consecrated to the god Baal. Hubal, Baal, same god, in Mecca when he's a baby, right? When he's a young boy. So, the examination of skeletal remains and the associated grave goods and the stele at the Tophet of Carthage and the comparison of the burial practice showed that the Phoenicians did practice child sacrifice. Here's the paper you can read. Now, so detestable was the practice of child sacrifice in Israel that Jeremiah prophesied that the valley of Hinnom would become the valley of slaughter, because there the Lord would judge and punish those who engaged in child sacrifice. So now we've established Baal, okay? And we've talked about Hubal, same god, same deity, same pantheon, the whole bit. Now, in the Sirah, that's in Muhammad's most reliable biography, take that for what it's worth, Muhammad is consecrated to Hubal, and Deus had an idol belonging to Amr bin Humam al-Dawsi, and the Quraysh had an idol by a well in the middle of the Kaaba called Hubal. So the Kaaba, the biggest, most prominent idol in the Kaaba, was the one to Hubal, right? And they adopted Isaf and Naila by the place of Zamzam. So they've had a couple more of these idols. And Abdul Muttalib denied this, but he was willing to submit the matter to the sacred lot. He said he would make 2 arrows for the Kaaba, 2 for them, 2 for himself. The 2 arrows which came out from the quiver would determine to whom the property belonged. And this was agreed, and accordingly made 2 yellow arrows for the Kaaba, 2 black ones for himself, and 2 white ones for the Quraysh. They were given to the priest in charge of the divinatory arrows and were thrown beside Hubal. Hubal was an image in the middle of the Kaaba, a graven image, a silim, right? Actually, let me go back here. I want to find something. I actually want to show you guys, remind you what a silim is. So we spoke of these before, right? These columns. Let me see. I think this will be it. Oh, no. So I'm going to try and find where the... Here we go. Here we go. I just want to show you this. This is a 9,000-year-old shrine in the Jordan, right? And these are graven idols and pillar statues. The whole area of Arabia has more than 50 sites where you have pillar statues. But these ones in Jordan are very well preserved. Notice the graven idol with the face on it. You see the faces on it. And these are called a silim, right? You may have known that silim is the root word for Islam. And Muslim is someone who does the thing. He worships the graven idol.
Yeah.
Any comments from you guys before I go on?
Yeah, you can still. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Go on. Go on.
What is the image on there? Because I mean, looking at the image I can see, there, it looks like the face of an owl. Is it of a human or an owl?
It's hard to tell. I mean, it's hard to tell, but it looks kind of vaguely human. But I mean, these are not exactly 21st century engravers, right?
No, but they were very good engravers, though, wouldn't they? So they're, you know, to me,
these are 9,000-year-olds, right? So,
yeah. Yes, with the topic of Baal. So yes, the Carthaginians, they even Hannibal Barca did a sacrifice with his father Hannibal Barca before going in his campaign. So that was the god that they actually sacrificed to, and babies and so on. Every time this false god appears somewhere, bad things happen all the time. Now, I have heard, I think it was from J. Smith, that the black stone in Mecca may have been one of the black stones from the Carthaginians that actually made its way first into the Levant. It was appearing and disappearing back and forth. It ended up going to Rome for a holiday for a couple of years, and then it went back again to Damascus and Jerusalem and so on. So there was this myth about the black stone of Baal, and then later on, you know, you have this black stone that appears in Mecca. So I don't think that it can be proven. There are competing theories, but it is possible that the origins of the black stone happens to be exactly that one.
Carthaginian, isn't that odd? Now look, again, I don't have all of the threads tied together, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence building up, a lot of things that have historical links that just start to overlap. And it is referred to by Abu Sufyan ibn Harb at the Battle of Uhud when he cried, "Arise, Hubal, make your religion victorious. Allahu Akbar," right? Allahu Akbar means our Allah is bigger, right? Not greater, but bigger, right? And to be victorious, we know this. So the whole cry of Allahu Akbar came with Hubal, the stone idol, otherwise known as Baal. And they would say, "Arise, Hubal, and make your religion victorious." So yeah, let's continue. So
actually, there's a lot of stuff we could get into here about Hubal, where he came from, about the sacrifices to him, the whole thing. There's a lot of stuff I could talk about, but you know, maybe we don't have time right now. But we should definitely talk about that more in depth when we have time. And also today we can still see, as you pointed out, a lot of these elements at the Kaaba today, you know, where at the center of the Kaaba is this black stone that you mentioned, right? And of course, this reminds me of the black sun. Maybe that's why it's black. The black sun was also identified as a pagan planetary deity. Those are all planetary deities, and you circle around the Kaaba 7 times, right? And back then, 7 planets were known, right?
Yeah.
So this is all as you call it, moonotheism, but actually it's sun worship. It's basically pagan sun worship, except that they don't
Yeah, you need
worship
to
the
understand
normal
who
sun we know
was-
now. They worship the black sun. That's why it's a black stone. That's why it had to be an asteroid from the heavens, and they circle around it 7 times.
You need to understand, in the West, they worship the sun because the sun was the main deity. But in Arabia, Mesopotamia, the moon was the main deity. They flipped. The sun was masculine, Rome and Greece, masculine sun, feminine moon. In Arabia, Mesopotamia, the opposite. So for them, it's the moon. So yeah, but Elagabalus, I wonder, the name Elagabalus, he had a black stone, yes, the Roman emperor. Does the name Baal, does that have anything to do with Baal? I'm just curious. And then also, then you have Abdul Muttalib was praying to Allah. Okay, now just notice they were praying to Hubal, and here they're praying to Allah. This is in Muhammad's Sirah. This is the biography of Muhammad. This is like the Gospels of Jesus, right? This is like Muhammad's version, right? Abdul Muttalib was praying to Allah, and they brought near Abdullah and 10 camels. Well, Abdul Muttalib stood by Hubal praying to Allah. I know the wording is confusing, it's deliberately weird, but ultimately you see he's praying to Allah, and Allah is Hubal, and Hubal is the Allah.
It's the same deity.
Yes, it's the same deity. Praying to Allah, praying to Hubal.
In paganism, that planet, this is associated with a specific planet, and that's also why some Muslims say that a black stone actually came down from the heavens, was an asteroid, presumably, and they claim it came down from that specific planet. It's identified with a specific planet, and Baal and Hubal and Allah and so on. Those are all the main pagan gods associated with that planet.
And Hubal is just he who is. Remember, Hu is just a prefix meaning he who is Baal. Hubal is he who is Baal. Ave Maria says, I learned that wells are used under sacrificial altars. The Kaaba is on top of the well. The eclipse was used by pagans to see if they appeased the sun god, right? Now notice here, and he took them before Hubal in the middle of the Kaaba. So the god Hubal or Baal, right, is in the middle of the Kaaba. And the statue of Hubal stood by a well. Child sacrifice well. It is in the well in which gifts made to the Kaaba were stored. Now, are they talking about babies sacrificed to Hubal or to Baal? That's a question one has to ask. I'll continue here. Abdullah was Abdul Muttalib's favorite son. Now, this, remember, he was playing to Baal and Hubal. This is Muhammad's grandfather. This is his son. So that's Muhammad's father there. And he was the father of the apostle of Allah. And Allah, as we discovered, is Hubal, Baal. So Allah was Baal before, God, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills just thinking about this. And Abdul Muttalib stood by Hubal praying to Allah. And we know that Allah was Baal before Muhammad came around. And they speak of Hubal being in Mecca, right? Actually, I see I've made a little typo there. So let me get, oops. So this says that Hubal being the, you know what? I'm just going to have to move this up. There we go. So Hubal being the greatest or most revered of the idols of the Quraysh in Mecca. This is according to Muhammad's own biography, that Hubal is the greatest, most revered. So Hubal, he who is Baal, is the most important deity to Muhammad's tribe. And if you wanted to circumcise a boy or make a marriage or bury a body or doubted someone's genealogy, they would take him to Hubal, right, to Allah. Abdul Muttalib took him before Hubal in the middle of the Kaaba where he stood and prayed to Allah. So Hubal and Allah are the same deity here, thanking him for this gift of the child. Then he brought him out and delivered him to his mother, and he tried to find foster mothers for him. And Zayd ibn Amr stayed as he was. He accepted neither Judaism nor Christianity. He abandoned the religion of his people and abstained from animals that had died, blood, and offerings to idols, right? So, sorry, I'm not sure why I put that in there. I'm sure I had a good reason. I cannot remember. Oh, so Zayd then says, not one of you follows the religion of Abraham, but I. So he's saying now, Abraham wasn't the father of the Jews, not the Jewish patriarch, but they followed the religion of Abraham, which is, moon worship, the worship of Al-Makkah, also known as Allah. And we now see that Allah in Islam is also Hubal, also named Baal. Am I to worship one Lord or 1,000? If there are as many as you claim, I renounce Allat and Al-Uzza, both of them. So Muhammad apparently renounces worshipping Allat and Al-Uzza. I will not worship Al-Uzza and her 2 daughters. I will not worship Hubal, though he was our Lord in the days when I had little sense. So Hubal was Allah. He admits he worshipped Hubal. But then, of course, he just rolls them all into one. And anyway, your thoughts, guys, so far?
This is from the biography of Muhammad, which would have been compiled centuries later. Where are the compilers getting all this information from?
Heaven alone knows. Nobody knows where they're pulling this stuff out of. But, I mean, the fact that they're saying it is actually pretty damning. These people were Baal worshippers. There must be a very strong influence, because they would, at least in theory, but we also know there were Christians there. Yeah, go on.
So how many years is this from Muhammad's birth to the biography being written down? How many centuries? 250.
250. And the original biographies are missing. This is basically a copy of a copy, basically.
Right. Also, what J. Smith has said about the biography of Muhammad is that the guy who did it in Germany, he just took all of the different fragments and stories that they were floating around, but that the stories are different in different places. So that if you were to compile the story of Muhammad based on the records from, say, Morocco, you will have a very different story. So it's certainly not a full composition. It's just this guy found different manuscripts, bits and pieces, and put them together. And people will tell us that it goes back to 250 years from the time of Muhammad. We don't know.
Right. Now notice Hubal is a 3rd century immigrant, apparently from Syria. So they speak of idolatry among the Arabs. The explanation currently in favor places the responsibility on this guy called Amr bin Luhay. He brought back to Mecca from Syria an idol of Hubal, and they stuck it in the Kaaba. So interesting. Other sources say from Mesopotamia, which is where we get our moon worship. And then, of course, they say this is the Encyclopedia of Islam. According to Abu Zayd and others, idolatry is not directly opposed to Tawheed. Islam is Tawheed; it rejects idolatry, right? But according to Abu Zayd and others, idolatry is not opposed to Tawheed. No one would be stupid enough to identify the Creator with a piece of wood. Of course, Muslims keep telling us that. But the error of the idolaters is they suppose that God has a form. Allah has no form. That's the Gnostic God again. So yeah, they're just odd that idolatry is not directly opposed to Tawheed. So yeah, just these odd references that I'm seeing. It's just really strange. So it's not that the idolaters give associates to God. So notice, accuse the idolaters of giving associating partners with Allah. That's not the problem, because associating partners with Allah is not opposed to Tawheed, because it remembers in the past there were many, many gods. The problem is that they suppose that God has a definite form. That's a very odd statement. Your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, this is Gnostic. This is basically the monad, the ultimate source God. He's not personified. He has no form. He might be, represented by such abstract concepts as like entire planetary bodies, but he's not like Jesus, who can manifest as a human.
Right. Any thoughts from you guys? I'll wind down. Let's go another 5 or 10 minutes. But any thoughts from you guys before we go on?
No,
not for me. I'm good.
Okay, so let's look at the origins of Hubal from the Smithsonian, right? And they tell us the Nabateans, and this is where this links with Dan Gibson finally. And that's why I think Dan Gibson's thesis is he's got some really good info, very interesting info, but not necessarily complete. So I think there's room for discussion on other ideas, other influences. The Nabateans worshipped powerful female deities and they built shrines in their honor. Archaeologists were stunned by the evidence for the worship of female deities in the ancient city of Petra long before Islam. And the Nabateans worshipped three female deities, Alat, and Alat is the feminine version of Allah. Then you have the goddess, right? And then Al-Uzza, the powerful one, and Manat, the goddess of fate. So Alat is the goddess, Al-Uzza is the powerful one. Remember I spoke of previously of the Sufis will say that Allah internally is female, externally is male, right? He has an internal female aspect and an external masculine aspect. Dr. Glenn Corbett from the American Center for Oriental Research in Jordan said the Nabateans who lived in Petra seem to have worshipped in particular the goddess Al-Uzza, who is termed the mightiest. And we just learned that Muhammad said he would give up worship of Al-Uzza. Yes, Emmanuel.
This aspect, that is usually associated with Baphomet, but it's not necessarily Baphomet. But this is also very, very Gnostic. This is also very important. The source god, the monad we just talked about, he is. There are entire long Gnostic stories about this, but bottom line is, yes, it's very important. He is not personified, but he is male and female at the same time. He's neither male nor female, and he's not personified. And then out from that source god emanates male and female forms and emanates humanity and all that. All that comes later. So this is why it's the source god. The source god is the source of everything, including male and female. That's why the source god is male and female at the same time.
Yeah, I've covered this on my channel before. This is the Baphomet. And the word Baphomet was first used during the Crusades in the 10th century, I think it was. And it was actually how they referred to Muhammad. Muhammad was the original Baphomet. So the term Baphomet originally referred, and notice this guy's a hermaphrodite. He's got boobies, right? And so he's got a male with a pair of boobies here. He's a hairy male with a pair of boobies. And this staff here didn't used to be, shall we say, a staff made of wood with a little, if you look at other photos of it, it's not this kind of staff.
This is the censored version where they replaced his staff with the staff of actually Hermes Trismegistus that we just talked about. And also a little Easter egg for you. Can you bring up the picture again?
I just deleted it. Let me just start again.
Well, it's not that important. But if the people who are watching this, they can just scroll back a little and look at the picture again, or look the picture up on Google. So a little Easter egg I noticed on the top of his head, since we talked about these pillars, right? You mentioned these pillars and they look like owls. Baphomet actually has an owl on the top of his head, but you have to zoom in a little bit to see it.
Yeah, but also he's also shown with moon symbols, top left and bottom right. He's actually shown with moon symbols, which is very interesting. He's linked to the moon as well. So near the Baphomet, so that symbolism continues. But the name the Baphomet that came from the Crusades, where apparently Baphomet was the war cry of these people who were supposedly Muslims but didn't call themselves Muslims. Now, the Quran mentions two prophets it claims were prophets from infancy. Of John, we read in Quran 90, verse 13, "O John, take the book with strength, and we gave him al-Hukm, the prophetic office, as a child." And of Jesus, we read in Quran 19:29 that while an infant, he said, "I am servant of Allah. He has given me the book and made me a prophet." We don't know what book he was given, but fine. So this Jesus is from the Gospel of the Infancy, and John in the Mandean Gnostic teaching. So Allah says to Muhammad in Quran 93:6, "Did he not find thee an orphan and give thee shelter, find thee wandering in error and guide thee?" Now, these words, this according to Arthur Jeffrey, he wrote the book on foreign words in the Quran, right? He identified over 2,000 foreign words in the Quran. And the words Dalan and Hada make it obvious the reference is to his being found by Allah in a false religion and guided to the true. And efforts were made later to claim it is being taken into his grandfather's house. Now, they're trying to clean up Muhammad's image here because Muhammad is supposed to be the perfect Muslim. and they want to hide the fact that there's all these references to Baal and Hubal. And he writes here, a few details of Muhammad's domestic life with his first wife, Khadija, are preserved. But there is an interesting passage in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which mentions that Muhammad and his wife had a custom of evening prayer. In this tradition, a neighbor says how he overheard Muhammad saying to his wife, "O Khadija, by Allah, I will not worship Allat, nor Al-Uzza. By Allah, I will not perform worship again." But Khadija said, "Leave Allat and leave Al-Uzza," and the neighbor adds, "These were their idols, which they used to worship and then go to bed." So Muhammad was, according to these sources, a worshipper of these pagan deities, Allat, Manat, and Al-Uzza.
I have to ask the question, why in a location that's predominantly illiterate, with no presence of mind as to who Muhammad was, would they write such detail about this man?
Hundreds of years later and thousands of miles away. Yeah.
Okay. May I add something to this?
Yeah.
So in here, someone hears that Muhammad said, "Oh, by Allah, I'm not going to do this anymore." Right. So there is a hadith where during the day of one of his wives, he goes and sleeps with one of his concubines, one of the slaves. The wife loses her mind. Is like, "What did you do?" And he says, "By Allah, I swear I'm never going to do this again." Okay, so 5 minutes later, he goes and he does it again. His wives lose their minds and say, "But you swore by Allah you were never going to do this." And his excuse was, "Well, but Allah told me not to forbid myself the things that were lawful." Which is like, well, just think about that. If he swore by Allah, even if Allah tells him, "Hey, you can do it," doesn't mean that he has to do it. But this is a guy that, according to the traditions, swears by Allah, and then without Allah commanding him to do something, he goes and breaks that oath. So if we put this together with that hadith, him saying, "I'm not going to do something, I swear by Allah," it means nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
Is that the same incident when Aisha turned around and says that your Lord hastens to allow you desires?
Yeah. Hubal actually always hastened to fulfill his desires. Yes.
Yep. Now, I'll finish here in Kitab al-Badi wa Tazriq of al-Maqdisi. Good grief, trying to say that. According to the ancient authority Al-Qatada, the first son of Khadija born to Muhammad in the Jahiliyyah was named Abd Manaf, servant of Manaf by Muhammad. So Manaf was an ancient idol venerated by the Quraysh, one of the most important divinities at Mecca. Now, Khadija is supposed to be the first Muslim.
I'd argue with that. I would say she's the true prophet of Islam.
Yeah, but so they name a son, according to tradition, after another pagan god, right? And this just goes on and just goes on. And then we can draw attention to a still more conclusive instance of Muhammad's association with ancient pagan worship, where we are given the words of a confession from his own lips. In his younger days, he had sacrificed a white ewe to Al-Uzza. Yaqut al-Hamawi, in the article on Al-Uzza in his geographical dictionary, says, Said Abu Mundir, it has reached us that the Prophet made mention of her, Al-Uzza, one day and said, "I made an offering of a reddish white ewe to Al-Uzza when I was following the religion of my people." And Al-Uzza is one of the three idols of the Kaaba mentioned by name in the Quran, and whose name was used by the Quraysh in their battle cry. So the battle cry was, but I thought they said Hubal. But okay, now there's a different battle cry. So that she seems to have been the most important of the many deities worshipped at Mecca, if not the original goddess of the place. So now we've got female most important goddess, Hubal, Allah, female.
Wasn't the black stone something to do with Aphrodite as well? That you see, there's so many stories. So many stories about the black stone.
And then the reddish ewe. I mean, does that link to the Jewish? The sacrifice of the red cow or red bulls at the Temple Mount. I just wonder. Just Anyway, so I think I can end here, but this is just all of these things. I'll finish here. Manaf, and Baal. Sorry, pre-Islamic god worshipped among the Quraysh. That's Manaf and other tribes. We know little about the deity, except the lists that are preserved by Muslim scholars, of all things. From the name, it would appear that he was an astral deity, astronomical, right? His idols were located in the Kaaba, and menstruating women kept away from them. And Manat, a female deity of the pre-Islamic period, associated with Lat and Al-Uzza and the daughters of Allah. Evidence shows that this goddess was very ancient. Her name appears in early Akkadian. So that is, yeah. And is one of the names associated with Ishtar. In Palmyra, she's shown as the seated deity holding a scepter and represented as the goddess of fate. In Arabia, her worship location was Yathrib, known as Medina. I think I'll leave it at that. What do you guys think so far?
I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
just briefly, I'll say that the more you talk, the less Abrahamic Islam sounds.
But that starts with the first sentence. It's just a travesty from the first sentence when you start doing investigation about how less Abrahamic this ideology is.
Yeah, why would the Islamic tradition preserve all of these things? You know, just find it odd. I mean, but yeah. And then of course scholars were all saying there was no paganism, it all died out by that time. But then you start to find a lot of evidence that these were embedded within the culture, within their racial memory and so on. Yeah.
I think if it's an ideology that's predicated on ad hoc improvisation, then all you've got is what you can graft from what your surrounding area and knowledges are. So that seems what it could possibly be, just an ad hoc ideology, grafted and grafting with a sense of reinvention and remolding it into the image of Muhammad. And by going to the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures and the Greek scriptures, and taking elements from those stories, you're almost sanctifying the Quran and Muhammad by doing that, because it has some kind of, if you like, connection to a previous strain of monotheism from their point of view.
Yeah, Emmanuel, final words. Huh?
Yeah, lots of things you mentioned, lots of things I would like to get into, but we don't have the time. But one thing I want to mention, since you just mentioned it, again, we talked about it a little last time as well. The infancy gospel of Thomas, not to be confused with the Gospel of Thomas. These are two entirely separate texts. It's the infancy Gospel of Thomas that's completely heretical and that's completely Gnostic. The Gospel of Thomas you can certainly interpret in a Gnostic way, just like you can interpret everything in a Gnostic way. But the infancy Gospel of Thomas, and that's where the Quran borrows from very, very heavily when it comes to, well, basically everything about Jesus. It's from the infancy Gospel of Thomas, and this is completely heretical. And actually, they just made a film from it, starring Nicolas Cage, and it's go watch it if you're not familiar with this stuff. But I gotta warn you, it's dark. It's blasphemous, and it's completely blasphemous, and it basically portrays Jesus as a villain.
Right. So. Now notice that Manat was linked with Alat and Al-Uzza, right? Probably as part of the process of the federation of the cult by the Meccans, but Ugaritic, this is from Canaan, right? Ugarit, this is just north of Israel. In Syria, Ugaritic evidence has linked 3 female deities as the daughters of Baal. So, yeah, just so you know, we're back to Baal again. Alat, Manat, and Al-Uzza are the daughters of Baal. So we come back to this idea. So yeah. So anyway, we just keep coming back to Baal and Muhammad and Baal, and Muhammad's grandfather and Baal, Muhammad's father and Baal, Baal being Allah, Baal being Hubal, Hubal being Baal being Allah, and of course the same being, yeah. So all of these pantheon, this whole pantheon of deities, all just connects. It's just all of these things that just connect, and I mean, so yeah, put together the ideas. So guys, I'll call it a night here, but thanks all very much for the time then. Any final words you want to say before we call it a day?
No, thank you for giving me the invite. I'd only just come in from work, and if I missed the beginning of the show and repeated any element that you brought out,
That's
I
okay.
do apologize.
No, it's okay. No, I mean, so, JC?
Thank you, Lloyd. Well done, and I look forward to the more breakdowns. But yeah, the more you speak, the more it sounds like they did have the Quran sort of from the Judeo-Christian heretical groups, but everything else they copied from different places. So well done.
Yeah, I don't know how it can be Abrahamic. I mean, have a look here. This is the Sabaean moon god Makkah, right? He's the king of the gods, right? And this is his symbol, the crescent and the star. You can see the moon symbol here, but you can see the crescent and the star. This goes back long before Islam. And he's the moon god Shin, also known as Nana, right?
So,
one of the oldest gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, I don't know if you did bring this up. I know you've brought it up in previous shows, and I've brought it up, and that's in the scripture in the Bible talking about people coming from a land with crescents hanging from their camels' necks.
Yeah, Gideon. Yeah, we'll mention that. Yeah, correct. And they were the enemies of the Jews. Yeah, enemies of God. Yeah. So there's just we'll continue with this, but there is just so much of this stuff that is utterly pagan, completely Babylonian, and related to moon god worship and to Baal. So yeah, I mean, just these influences are clearly there, constantly in the background of Islam and in Muhammad's tribe and in the stories, and yeah, just all there. So guys, thank you. I think we'll call it a night here. It's a lot to process, a lot to think about. Maybe there's nothing definitive here, but I mean, once you start to put all this evidence together, I mean, it just paints a picture that just doesn't look Abrahamic. It looks positively Babylonian pagan. So guys, thank you very much. God bless, and we'll see you guys soon.
God bless.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Emmanuel.